Despite this particular penny stock listed on Bursa Malaysia doubling since the day I invested in it, right? I still am going to sell this particular stock, right? So most episodes, right, I'm talking about buying and buying and buying stocks, right? But I very seldom talk about selling shares. So in this episode, I want to talk a little bit about selling a particular share and why I'm selling this particular share, right? So I think to give a little background story, this particular share or this particular stock's name is Impiana. And what Impiana does is that it is involved in the hotel business. And how I actually got to know this particular name is that quite recently, last year, I still remembered. It was, I guess it was January, February, every month. Okay, January when I went to the hotels, I noticed it was maybe 80 or 90% booked. February when I went to the hotel, it was 80 or 90% booked. March, also the same thing. Every month, the hotels were very crowded, right? And I was thinking about it, right, just this morning, and I think number one, it could be the pent up demand, where a lot of people post the MCO, after being locked up for so long, right? They just wanted to go out, right? That's number one, and number two, I think that since things are getting a bit more expensive, a lot of people they opted to just travel locally lah, as opposed to travel abroad. So the phenomena of staycation is was getting more and more popular back then, right? So I realized that every other month when I went to the hotels or for staycation or just to makan, I realized one thing. I realized that every other month when I'm booking into a particular hotel, as an analyst, I always like to ask lah, how's the occupancy rate, right? They said, oh, it's 80%. And I said, oh, how's the occupancy rate, right? Sometimes it goes up to 90, but very seldom 100% lah. 100% is during the festive season. And if you guys are wondering, occupancy rate, meaning to say how many rooms there are. So the higher the occupancy rate, meaning to say is that the more rooms the hotel actually booked, right? So if it's 90% means it's actually industry standard lah, especially during the holidays, right? Means it's very, very fully booked already. And if you go to a hotel when it's 90% occupancy rate, right, you see it's crowded. You go for breakfast, so many people will be around, right? And that's very, very crowded, right? 50% is when it's not so crowded lah, basically, right? I noticed this particular rates during the MCO when the country just started opening their borders, right? Or when the country started to enable people to travel, about 40 to 50% occupancy rate, right? But right now, like I said, last year, January 80 to 90% occupancy rate, February 80 to 90%. So it was very, very, very crowded, right? So I still remembered, right, during that point in time, I think I was actually just thinking, to myself. I said, what is a very good stock to invest in, especially right now? And it dawned onto me, since hotels are always booked or always fully booked, why don't I invest in a hotel, right? And like I told you guys, a stock is another word for stock is basically a share, right? And when you buy a share, you're basically a shareholder or you are a small little owner for that particular company, right? So I decided to actually look around for some hotel stocks, right? As per usual, my favorite trusty friend is Google. And Google showed me this particular stock by the name of Impiana, right? And right now, I think it's called Magna or Magma, right? Where it's actually trading at 20 cents, as we speak now. But anyway, back then when I was looking at it, I was like, oh, okay, this particular stock, it was trading at between 12 to 13 cents. It was quite cheap, right? So I said, you know what? Why don't I just put some money in this particular stock? A couple of things which I did after looking at that, after Googling it, after looking at the price. Another thing which I'm going to share in today's episode, I think you guys are ready, is that not only you have to look at the business, you also have to look at the balance sheet and also the income statement. All right. And income statement is basically to look at the company's numbers, right? So if the income statement indicates that the revenues, right, is going up, and also the profit is going up. Basically, the business is doing better and better. So when I actually look at the balance sheet and the income statement for this particular company before I invested in it, I noticed that it was getting better, lah, right? During the whole MCO, it was making losses, and understandably so, right? But right now, the loss has been narrowing, lah, right? And they're getting more and more profitable as we speak. So I decided to invest in that particular stock, and a couple of months later, lah, the stock actually went up to about 24 cents, right? So at that point in time, I felt like, wow, very smart, lah. I mean, I bought it for about 12 to 13 cents, and then it went up to 24 cents, right? It almost 2x, lah, basically, right? And I was super happy with regards to the purchase, lah, right? That being said, the big question right now is, why am I talking about selling the share, right? Or why am I talking about selling the stock, right? And quite honestly, if you look at my previous episode, I shared with you guys the portfolio which I have. You will notice I do not have any more of the Impiana stock or the Magma stocks. Hey, thanks for the likes. Thanks for the likes. Thank you so very much. So basically, what I've done is, and why I sold this particular share is, I think 3 or 4 reasons, right? Reason number one is that during Chinese New Year, I normally go around and look at indicators, and I noticed that during Chinese New Year, every year, right, they typically have maybe dinner, right, is one of the more important days, especially Chinese New Year Eve, right, where some restaurants, right, they have like 3 slots, The first slot is between 5 to maybe 6:30. The second slot is between 6:30 to 8 o'clock. And the last slot is between 8 o'clock to 9:30. And typically, right, if it's a very busy Chinese New Year, right, all 3 slots will be fully booked. All 3 slots will be fully booked. And why Chinese New Year Eve is very, very important is that it's a time when grandkids will go and see their grandparents, and then after that they also see their parents, and then you probably see 3 or 4 generations on a particular table, right? And sometimes one table is not enough. Sometimes we have to take 3 or 4 tables, it's us, the cousins, and then even the cousins' kids. So it gets very meriah, so to speak. So that is maybe the previous few Chinese New Years, This Chinese New Year, however, I realized one thing, right? I realized when trying to book a particular table, this year I went to KL as opposed to Ipoh. Normally I go to Ipoh, right? But this year I actually had my Chinese New Year over in KL, and I realized that the dinner slots, right, instead of 3 slots, they already reduced it to 2 slots. That's observation number 1. And observation number 2 is that even the dinner slots, right, typically, like I said, restaurant will be very full. This year, when I went for dinner, I realized there's only 2 or 3 tables only besides our table, right? And, the restaurant looks very, very empty. So, that's indicator number 1, that maybe a lot of people, they're just not going out for Chinese New Year, right? So that's number 1. Number 2, right? This is the later indicator, Hari Raya, right? When I went to the bazaar, I said this in my previous few episodes. I went to Jalan Tar, right? And Jalan Tar is a place where a lot of people actually go there to buy their Hari Raya stuff. They not only buy their baju raya, they also buy their kuih muih, they also buy all the biscuits, to give all their cousins and whatnot. That being said, when I went to Jalan Tar, I realized that there were a lot of people walking back and forth. Cumanya, there are not many people buying things, So basically, you see a lot of people, at the, I guess the walkway lah. Cumanya, if you go look at the shops, right? Many of the shops, not many people, right? Is relatively empty. So, that's indicator number 1. I noticed that there are a lot of people walking around, but not many people buying. Indicator number 2, right, is this lah. I noticed when talking to my friends, he actually had a gerai, especially, and his gerai was open dekat Negeri Sembilan, right? And him being, penyaga kan, so he actually talked to other people, where is a very good tapak, right? And over in Negeri Sembilan, there's this one place, with the Stadium Negeri Sembilan, where, every year, memang penuh, memang meriah, right? Cumanya this year, the gerai-gerai dekat stadium, not that many people. And I asked him personally, I said, how sales? he told me that his sales actually dipped more than half compared to last year, right? And he was telling me, there were times where he'll be waiting and he'll probably get one or two sales, right? And I asked him about, how about his neighbors and whatnot. Some of his neighbors, right, sales were so bad that they did not know what to do with the food. So they just, every day they just show up and then they just give the food. They just show up and then, instead of, buang makanan kan, so they just give to their neighbors and whatnot lah, for free lah, right? And even those yang buat air or those which makes water, right, yang bancuh air, even those guys also, they have all these big containers, or we call it balang in Bahasa lah, right? Where they stir and stir and stir, right? A lot of this one, they could not even sell for all of their balang, there'll be residue of water. So not only food, but also water. They also had a dip in sales lah. And the third indicator which I'm looking at lah is this. If we were to look at maybe TikTok also, right? I've been looking at certain people that actually, the owners of this garai, they were talking about, how the cost of operations has been increasing. Raw materials has been increasing, right? Rice, sugar, tepung, almost everything has increased in price. That being said, if they want to sell it to people, right? If it's too expensive, people won't buy. So basically, they have increased costs and also not many sales lah. So basically, a lot of these garai had to close much earlier. They could not roll their modal, or they could not make a profit within the first couple of days. So they decided to close their garai, right? So basically, all in all, what I'm trying to say is that people are not spending, right? People are not spending. And part of the reasons why I talked about this on this channel many times is that, inflation right now is getting a bit more higher, right? So if we were to look last year, it was the OPR which increased. And every time when the OPR increased, what will happen is that our loans will get more and more expensive. So even at the start of the month, right? Before we even start the month, we open all our bills, right? There's our car loans, our housing loans, and those which are younger, they have their PTPTN loans, right? And before we even start the month, when we get our salary, straight away we pay a lot of these loans, and a lot of these loans actually increase in price. As I mentioned, if OPR increases, the loan also, the amount also increases when we have to pay. That's number one. Number two is, if we were to look at our daily needs lah, one of the daily needs is maybe beras or rice, right? And quite honestly, right now, if we were to look at harga beras or or rice, we could see that local rice is very difficult to get. Before this, local rice was about 26 ringgit per 10 kgs. Right now, to find local rice is impossible. It's quite difficult. So, we have to buy imported rice, and as we know, imported rice are between 30, the mid 30s, 35 to maybe 45, 46 ringgit lah. And sometimes I actually saw some rice, right? They are actually charging about 60 ringgit for 10 kgs. So yeah, it's really expensive. So long story short, what I'm trying to say is that if us consumers, right, if we have to pay, if every month when we get our salary, we have to pay loans, and we also, if our groceries are getting more and more expensive. On top of that, for every time when we go keluar makan, or when we go to, when we go out to eat, at the garai and whatnot, right? It's expensive, right? It is expensive. So what's going to happen is that we will not have that much of disposable income. And when we don't have that much of disposable income, we won't spend. And we could see that this happened during Chinese New Year and also Hari Raya, right? These are the two indicators. And the last indicator, right, I'm looking at is that, right now with a lot of geopolitical instability, right, you can see that the crude oil prices has been increasing and increasing and increasing. Basically, if crude oil prices increase and if the government decides to pull out the subsidies, what's going to happen is that, another inflation, things are going to get expensive, right? So not only our transport costs will increase, but also our food. And the question is, why would fuel prices impact food prices, right? So I'll give you a quick example. So right now, if we have a plate of rice, right, and also say we have fish, right, in order for the rice to get from, the paddy fields in Kedah to our table, say we stay in Selangor, right? It has to go through many, many processes. Number one, from the farm, it needs to go to the rice mills, right? And in the rice mills, they have to process it. Then from the rice mills, they have to go to the wholesaler, right? And then from the wholesaler, it needs to go to the retailers. And then from the retailers, it comes to us. So every time, every cycle or every touch point it goes to, right? And if prices of fuel were to increase, what's going to happen? Prices of food will also increase. So if crude oil prices were to increase, global crude oil prices were to increase, what's going to happen is that transportation costs will increase and also food price will also increase. All in all, what I'm trying to say is that we can already see early signs, Hari Raya, Chinese New Year, we can see that people are spending less. On top of that, moving forward, the future indicators, I can see that crude oil prices has been increasing, and this will definitely impact our petrol prices and also food prices. And if these two things were to go up, what's going to happen is that we will have less disposable income. And when we have less disposable income, we would spend less on luxury items or items which are considered fun lah. And one of them is traveling and also hotels, right? So with that, right, I decided to sell my shares, right, in Impiana or Magma, I think, or Magna, right? Even though I think I sold it for 20 cents, right? So I made quite good gains lah, maybe about 50 to 60% gains now. It's not bad. But that being said, right, beyond that, the main reason why I actually opted out to sell this particular share is that, I'm looking at the indicators, right? And I'm worried. I'm worried that, if people have less disposable income, will this impact the demand for travel and also hotels, right? So just wanted to give you guys an update, right? And what I bought instead is actually an oil and gas company. So right now I'm actually focusing more and more towards oil and gas. And as I mentioned, oil and gas has been, I guess, appreciating in terms of prices, right? Right now with a lot of things happening in the Middle East, right? So I decided to buy oil and gas stocks, right? With that, if there's any questions, please put it down in the comment section. If not, I hope to see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Bye.